You'll also recall that this piece of casting here that was white was quite a lot different from what I'd done, probably a couple of years ago here. And you can see how it's all nicely blended together. You don't get a contrast between the two. It flows together. The wash that we did on the blending of the plaster worked out nicely. The stain goes on, the same red, washing it with the Payne's gray again, and it's all pulled together, so you don't really see what's been applied now as a contrast to what was done originally. Same thing here. This was all new plaster work here, and up in underneath the trestle, and you can see how it all is blended together quite nicely. Also in the back of this trestle, all the rock work is all brought together here with the same wash, and even if the pigment does stain the trestle a little bit, what it does, it sort of brings the dust that's in that area, sort of blending the timbers into the scenery with the same colors. What I'd like to try and do here is put a lot of trees in here, and that will require a little bit more background painting, putting some more trees in the background so that that scenery goes way off in the distance, and the trees will come along through the side here. And in so doing, I'll have masses of trees on both sides of the track, with the intention that the track is running through a cut through the trees, the same as this basically going to go as a cut through the rock work. The next step is going to be to apply ground cover over all these smooth areas. When I say ground cover, I don't necessarily mean grass, but we'll start off with crushed stone or gravel, sort of a dirt base, perhaps some sand, and I'll paint all of this with white glue, carpenter's white glue, because carpenter's white glue dries in a matte finish, and then we'll sprinkle the gravel over all these areas, just leaving the rocks themselves exposed, and we'll apply some grasses and some pebbles and things like that, just to give it a very natural feeling in here, and we'll build that up with some shrubs, and that'll all be a base that'll be underneath where the trees will come up through this foreground. And by putting trees up in front of the trestle, it adds dimension, because what you're doing is you're looking through foreground into what is the prime scene, being the track, and you get that layered dimension, and it'll make it a much more attractive scene through here. I've mixed some Payne's gray with a little bit of burnt umber, and I've put matte medium in it, and what I want to do now is just very, very subtly with almost a dry brush, create some shadows on the underside of the rock work. So what we'll do, we'll just take a look at this area here, and very gently just bring up, and most of it is going to be very diluted with matte medium, and just dry brush the underside of some of these coarse textured areas here. Just very, very dry, very, very subtle, because what it'll do, it'll create a shadow on the bottom edge of some of the rock, just to emphasize some of the shadows. And it's a very, very dry brush effect, and it'll just bring out some of the rock work in the highlights. I'm not a big proponent of painting highlights, but it does justify it if you do it very carefully. So I've taken and I've just mixed a slightly lighter color than what we had painted the rocks, and mixed lighter and dark areas. But what I'm going to do now is wipe the brush off as much as I can, and scrub it on the ground. And then what we're going to do is very lightly dry brush over the top with a downward stroke as opposed to an upward stroke like we did with the dark color. And what that's doing is very, very, very subtly adding a highlight to the top edge of the rock, And you got to make sure the brush is very, very dry, because you don't really want to see the paint. Step 1 now complete, with the rock all colored and the highlights applied. Next step will be to put the gravel and dirt on the flat areas. I've collected some dirt, crushed rock, from a variety of sources that's very close to the color of my castings. So now what I've done is taken some diluted carpenter's white glue and water, and I'm just brushing liberally areas that I want the gravel to be on, and just putting a very diluted base of white glue and water on the ground where we're going to have essentially rocks and dirt and grass and that sort of thing. And I'm going to sprinkle the gravel and dirt into this. It's not necessarily going to all bond immediately, and I don't expect it to, because what we'll do afterwards is spray white glue and water into the mix, and that'll secure it. So this is just to give it a bit of a base. And again, just take a tray with white glue and water and just giving it a bit of a base so that it doesn't all blow away and run off, and just bring it over the edge of the rock castings. It can be very, very wet, very diluted, and as I said, it's just simply to help secure the rock where I want it to be. This dirt. And then we're going to I use a teaspoon. It's a little easier to carry small amounts, and kind of sprinkle it in. And if I get too much in one area of the lump, I'll just use a brush. And you can build it up to get little embankments where the river, or they should say the gravel has built up around the foundations, and we'll do a little tweaking with the dry brush in a few minutes. Some of the base of the bench will have a little more fill, and then I just let it dribble on naturally on these bottom edges of the rock. Let it kind of spill out on its own in a very natural fashion. It'll pocket and pool in places, and